Okay, everyone, I'm going to keep this part 2 really short. It's Halloween after all. Just a few things, and this mostly is a big picture type of point about the tension that starts to develop between an increase of papal power, meaning power of the Pope. The Pope is head of the Christian Church in Rome. This also applies to Christians who are living in the Byzantine Empire at this time, so kind of Christendom that maybe includes a wide number of Christians. And the papal authority we see starts to grow in the, kind of 1050s into the 1100s. Some of this is coming from a variety of reforms. Some of these reforms, for example, so I'll note one reform, the Lateran Council, which meets consistently, has a meeting in 1059. They start to make some reforms. One of those reforms relates to how the Pope is actually selected. Previously, there could be some role for the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, like Otto, for example, to have some say in authorizing the selection of the Pope. In the new reforms, the church kind of decides, it's cardinals, those who are underneath the Pope in the church hierarchy. The cardinals will ultimately have a process to pick the Pope. And it's still the cardinals to this day that pick the Roman Catholic Pope. There's also some banning of things like no marriage for priests. So in Byzantine, this is an argument, but in Western Europe, we start to see priests taking vows of celibacy and also banning simony, the inability to sell, roles in the church, for a fee. And there's also this sense that the Pope has, direct orders, in a sense, is like the, vicar of Christ on earth. So there is a belief using religious texts that there is a kind of role for the Pope that is specific and different and is descended from a higher power. So it kind of emphasizes the power of the Pope. One way we see this play out is in debates known as the investiture debates. And this has to do with, who actually gets to pick positions within the church, for example. Is it the secular ruler or is it the church leader? And so investiture debates start to develop, and one example of an investiture debate that gets very, very ugly, excommunications and begging for the excommunication to be dropped and whatever, is between the individual we see on the screen, Gregory VII, and Charles IV. Okay, so don't have to know a lot about that particular debate, just have a sense that this lay investiture question is one place that we see power struggles, who has greater authority, a monarch, say, of England, or the Pope who might be leading the Christian church in Rome. The other things that we can kind of note, just in terms of the role of a monk, monks and nuns are not lay people. They actually play a role in the church, but monks and nuns are different than priests who might be serving people and giving sacraments as part of a church community. Monks and nuns tended to isolate themselves, and they might even be organized in a variety of different orders. And over the course of time, we see reforms for monasteries and reforms for convents. This just gives us a sense of the rigidness after some of those reforms, in particular the Benedictine rules, how a monk's day might be spent. You can see a difference maybe between the summer and the winter, but we get a sense some time is dedicated to sleeping, but most time is really dedicated to church service, which might be prayer, and also work. And of course, we see that monks are really expected in a lot of cases to take vows of silence. They might also take vows that suggest they can't hold property. They might also be taking certain time for meditation and for reading, pretty rigorous schedule. It's kind of it reminds me of our BCA schedule, right? Is this kind of round the clock, workload. The scriptorium kind of know a little bit about this from the benchmark. Monks are this literate class, and they are often the ones who are copying manuscripts, making them into what we would today recognize as books. They're often illustrated because lots of people are not literate at this time. So images that are kind of detailing, and this is almost like the creation of an art form. These manuscripts take a very, very long time to do. So I'm just going to note one more thing as I give Mr. Kramer his paper. Sorry, I'm doing a video for my class. Hi, Mr. Kramer, who's also wearing a cape. Very good. Yes. The last slide, just in case you are looking at that one benchmark, the monasterial reforms, there is a great deal of things in the benchmark text about different types of monastery orders, and also a couple of things about rules and restrictions and reforms. One thing we know, monks and nuns are devoting their life basically to prayer. They live in very isolated spaces, sometimes like on the side of a very large hill. They are designating and sacrificing essentially their life, for religion. They are also, in a lot of cases, serving as the social system in like early European society, Middle Ages society. They are, housing people in some cases, serving the sick or whichever. We also can note that lots of people who are becoming monks or nuns sometimes are doing so for religious reasons. Of course, there's a lot of examples where people are doing so to opt out of some other type of Middle Ages life. Some people are choosing the lifestyle of a monk or a nun where they may not be fighting, may not be involved in conflict. They may have access to literacy if they're female, where they may not have had otherwise. So there's all kinds of ways, but usually monks and nuns are coming from the noble classes. They may have other choices, but choose, or perhaps there's someone in the family who might be pushing them into this particular role. And of course, there are these reforms. So we might be able to note the Benedictine rules. These come early in the timeline, around the 500s or so. These are rules that make it much more strict. The sense is at the time that St. Benedict comes up with these rules for monasteries that they're just too loose, and they're really not necessarily spaces dedicated to religious pursuits. So the rules are such where there's going to be particular vows that monks may take. Those vows include, chastity, include silence and whatnot. And it changes kind of the focus, and the role of an abbot is somebody who is organizing the monastery. So the abbot becomes a source of where monks have to kind of be obedient and whatnot. The rules of the monastery come down from the abbey. There's also abbot, rather. The later reforms, also continue. There's a great deal of later reforms. Some of these are focused on heresy. There's also, which would mean, maybe Christians not following some of the Pope's rules. There's also these variety of orders. The Dominicans, for example, who kind of form in this time period and maybe are traveling monks. So some groups of monks are doing some things that are different than the typical monastery, committing to particular pursuits, poverty, for example. And there's also these groups of monks that are sometimes referred to as the ascetics. These are folks who are demonstrating incredible sacrifice to others for their Christian religion. So sitting on a pole for really lengthy time periods, not communicating with anyone else, maybe isolating oneself in kind of a small tucked away room or a basement for lengthy periods of time, some type of deprivation that's indicating one's kind of sense of sacrifice. That is something that we don't see that's uncommon. But the big takeaway is that the Christian church does play a really strong role in the rules, in the order, in the justice, and also kind of in the overseeing of some of the belief systems that are important in Middle Ages. Something that we'll try to get some time to look at tomorrow is the way in which some groups of people are marginalized, in some cases by the church, in some cases by Christians. We in particular see this in different points in the Middle Ages regarding Jews. So there are many Jewish communities throughout Western Europe at this time, and at various points in time, there are increases in anti-Semitism and ways in which that come about, travel and, stereotypes and rumors and very, very problematic things, sometimes coming from the church, sometimes maybe looking to be dialed down a little bit by the church. But these issues of anti-Semitism are very significant in the Middle Ages. And despite that, we see large numbers of Jews actually participating very actively in the towns and cities and in the Middle Ages economy. So there's a great deal of ways in which we see communities of like non-Christians becoming very significant in the society. At the same time, oppression toward some of those individuals. So that's something else that we can try to address in terms of specific experiences that people have in the Middle Ages. Not only can we look at the role of the church, but we can also kind of consider how that plays out, differently in different people's lives. Okay, be well. I will see you in class.